Ambassador Marcus Reed stood in the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by representatives from over 1,000 different species. The Galactic Council had never been more united than it was today. Every single member had voted the same way, and now they were ready to deliver their judgment. The speaker, a tall blue creature with 6 arms, raised its voice so everyone could hear. The Council has reached its decision. Humanity and the planet Earth are hereby exiled from galactic civilization. You have 1 solar rotation to remove all human presence from Council space. Marcus looked around the chamber. He saw anger in some faces, fear in others, and satisfaction in many. The Velkari delegation was practically celebrating. The Thornish representatives nodded their approval. Even the usually neutral Greylings seemed pleased with the decision. The charges against your species are serious, the speaker continued. Aggressive expansion into territories claimed by others. Reckless terraforming that damages natural ecosystems. Your people refuse to follow established protocols. You negotiate too hard, fight too fiercely, and adapt too quickly. The galaxy has decided that humans are too unpredictable to remain part of civilized space. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, sensor, and optical organ focused on Marcus. This was the moment when most exiled species would beg. They would promise to change, offer tributes, or plead for mercy. The Council expected tears, desperation, or at least angry protests. Instead, Marcus smiled. The reaction was immediate. Confused whispers filled the chamber. The speaker's blue skin darkened with surprise. The Velkari delegation stopped their celebrating and stared. Marcus reached up and removed his diplomatic insignia from his uniform. The small golden pin that marked him as Earth's official representative gleamed in the chamber's lights. He walked forward and placed it carefully on the speaker's podium. "Thank you," he said calmly, "for making this easy." The chamber erupted. Thousands of voices spoke at once in hundreds of different languages. The speaker pounded his gavel, trying to restore order. "You accept the exile?" the speaker asked when the noise finally died down. "We accept," Marcus replied. "No appeals. No negotiations, no delays. Consider this our official response to your vote." He turned to his aide, a young woman named Lieutenant Foster who had been taking notes throughout the hearing. "Send the signal to Director Hayes. Tell her it's time for Project Exodus." Foster nodded and activated her communication device. A brief coded message went out on a frequency the Council didn't know existed. Within seconds, that message would reach every human world, every human ship, and every human outpost in the galaxy. The Velkari ambassador, a creature that looked like a walking tree, stood up. "This is not how exiled species behave. Where is your fear? Where are your pleas for mercy?" Marcus looked at the alien with genuine amusement. "You voted to exile us because you said we were unpredictable. Did you really expect us to react predictably to exile? But your colonies," another delegate called out. "Your trade routes. Your people will suffer without access to galactic resources." "Will they?" Marcus asked. He seemed completely unconcerned. "I suppose we'll find out." The speaker leaned forward. "Ambassador Reed, surely you understand what this means? No species survives exile. The galaxy is too large, too dangerous, too complex for any one race to manage alone. You will beg to return within a year." Marcus picked up his briefcase and headed for the exit. "We'll see about that." As he reached the chamber doors, he paused and turned back. "Oh, and speaker, you might want to start thinking about who's going to handle the medical crisis on Theta 7, or the engineering problems in the outer spiral, or the mining operations that keep your economy running. But don't worry. I'm sure you'll figure something out." The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss. In the silence that followed, the speaker looked around the chamber. For the first time since the hearing began, doubt crept into his voice. The human was bluffing. They have to be. No species can survive without the Council. But even as he spoke, reports were already coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships were leaving their stations. Human colonies were shutting down their communications. Human traders were abandoning their routes. And on the edge of known space, something was happening that would change everything. Director Hayes stood in the command center of Outpost Omega, humanity's most remote installation. The message from Marcus had arrived exactly on schedule. She looked at the massive display screen that showed a map of human positions throughout the galaxy. "All stations report ready," her communications officer announced. "Excellent," Hayes replied. She activated the base-wide announcement system. This is Director Hayes. Project Exodus is now active. All personnel, initiate your assigned protocols. The galaxy has made their choice. Now we make ours. Across human space, the response was immediate and coordinated. This was not a panicked retreat. This was a carefully planned operation that had been in development for decades. Human cargo ships began loading not just people and supplies, but entire manufacturing plants. Orbital stations didn't just shut down, they were systematically stripped of every useful component. Mining operations extracted their final loads and then activated charges that would make the asteroid fields useless for centuries. The aliens watching these activities were puzzled. This wasn't how Exile usually worked. Exiled species typically fought to keep their territory until the very end. They clung to their colonies and begged for more time. Humans were abandoning everything voluntarily, and they seemed almost happy about it. What the aliens didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this day for 50 years. Deep in the archives of the Terran Strategic Command, files marked Exodus Protocol had been updated monthly for half a century. Every human colony had been built with quick dismantling in mind. Every mining operation included evacuation procedures. Every trade route had been mapped with alternative destinations. Humanity had learned long ago that they were different from other galactic species. They adapted faster, fought harder, and thought in ways that made other races uncomfortable. The exile vote had been coming for decades. Smart humans had been preparing. Foster finished sending the coded messages and looked at Marcus. "Sir, all human installations are reporting successful protocol activation. The fleet commanders are ready to begin Phase 2. Marcus nodded. "And the construction projects?" "Still operational and undetected. The Void installations report full readiness." For the first time since the hearing began, Marcus allowed himself a real smile. "Then let's go home." "Home, sir?" Marcus looked out the window at the stars beyond the space station. "Home is wherever humans choose to make it, Lieutenant. The galaxy just helped us choose a new one." Behind them, the council chamber was still in chaos. Delegates argued, blamed each other, and tried to understand what had just happened. But none of them were asking the right question. They weren't asking what humanity had been building in the darkness beyond the galactic rim. They weren't asking why humans seemed so prepared for exile, and they certainly weren't asking what would happen when the galaxy realized what they had lost. They would learn soon enough. As Marcus's ship departed the station, a final message went out on all human frequencies. Phase 1 complete. All units proceed to Rally Point Alpha. The real journey begins now. In the void between galaxies, massive structures that had been hidden for generations began powering up their systems. Humanity's true home was waiting. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth, but humanity had never intended to stay exiled for long. The galaxy voted to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be asked twice. Director Elena. Hayes watched the massive display screen in the Exodus Command Center. Thousands of points of light were moving across the star map, each one representing a human ship, station, or colony. What looked like chaos to outside observers was actually the most organized evacuation in galactic history. Colony ship Nelson reports successful evacuation of mining station 7, her communications officer announced. Demolition charges activated. The asteroids will be radioactive for the next 300 years. Confirmed, Hayes replied. What's the status on the agricultural worlds? Botanical warfare protocols complete. The soil has been treated with human-specific organisms. Any species trying to farm those worlds will find their crops dying within weeks. Hayes nodded approvingly. Humanity wasn't just leaving their territories. They were making sure those territories would be useless to whoever tried to claim them next. The evacuation had been planned down to the smallest detail. Every human settlement in galactic space had been built with quick removal in mind. Manufacturing plants could be disassembled and packed within hours. Orbital stations were designed to break down into transportable modules. Even the cities on human-controlled worlds had been constructed using prefabricated components that could be loaded onto cargo ships. But this wasn't just an evacuation. It was a revelation. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the massive carrier ship Defiance, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history formed up around him. 3,000 ships of every size and class stretched out in all directions. Colony ships filled with civilians, cargo vessels loaded with entire factories, Warships providing protection, and at the center of it all, the transport ships carrying something. "Captain," his sensor officer called out, "we're receiving approach signals from the Council scout ships." Morrison looked at his tactical display. A dozen alien vessels were maintaining what they thought was a safe distance, trying to monitor the human departure. They expected to see a desperate refugee fleet, packed with frightened humans begging for food and supplies. They were about to be very disappointed. "Open a channel to the lead scout ship," Morrison ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Velkari captain whose tree-like features showed obvious confusion. "Human vessel, this is Captain Thornbark of the Council Scout Fleet. We are here to monitor your compliance with the Exile order." Morrison smiled politely. "Monitor away, Captain. You might learn something." The human fleet was heading for the edge of known space just as expected, but their course wasn't random. The aliens watching couldn't understand why humans were traveling toward the galactic rim with such purpose, as if they knew exactly where they were going. What the aliens didn't know was that humanity had been sending ships into the void for 50 years. Deep in the Defiance's secure data vaults, star charts showed routes that no alien had ever traveled, coordinates that led to empty space between galaxies, supply caches hidden in the darkness, and construction sites that would make the galactic powers tremble if they knew what was being built there. "Dr. Torres, report to the bridge," Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. Dr. Rebecca Torres arrived within minutes, carrying a datapad filled with construction reports. She was the chief architect of humanity's most secret project, something so ambitious that even other humans found it hard to believe. "How are our advanced teams doing?" Morrison asked her. "All installations report ready for the fleet's arrival," she replied. "The void stations have been expanding their operations for 6 months. We're ready to receive the entire human population and then some." Morrison turned back to the screen showing the confused alien captain. "Captain Thornbark, you should probably report back to your council. Tell them that humanity sends their regards." The channel closed, leaving the aliens to puzzle over what they had just heard. Back on the council station, emergency sessions were being held every few hours. The alien delegates were beginning to realize that they might have made a serious mistake. "The humans have destroyed their own colonies," the Grayling representative reported. "Every world they abandon becomes useless to us. Every mining station they leave behind has been sabotaged." The speaker's blue skin had turned a worried shade of purple. "What about their technology? Surely they left behind some of their medical equipment, their engineering tools." "Nothing," another delegate replied. "They took everything, even the blueprints. Our technical teams can't understand how their machines worked." A new voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. It was the Zentarian ambassador, a species known for their analytical minds. "Has anyone considered what the humans have been doing in the outer regions? Our long-range sensors have detected unusual energy signatures near the galactic rim." The chamber fell silent. No one had thought to monitor humanity's activities in empty space. Why would they? There was nothing out there but void and darkness, the Zentarian continued. "I've been reviewing the data. For the past several decades, human ships have been traveling beyond our sensor range on a regular basis. We assumed they were exploring or conducting scientific research. And now?" the speaker asked. "Now I think they were building something." Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its journey toward the rim. As they traveled, more ships joined them from hidden bases and secret installations. The fleet that had seemed large at the beginning of the journey was now massive beyond comprehension. Morrison received regular reports from his scouts. "Captain, we're detecting the outer marker beacons. Arrival at Rally Point Alpha in 6 hours." "Excellent," Morrison replied. "Signal the fleet. Prepare for transition to deep space protocols." What happened next surprised even the humans. As the fleet approached the edge of known space, massive structures began appearing on their sensors. Not natural objects like asteroids or rogue planets, but artificial constructions on a scale that dwarfed anything in galactic civilization. The lead alien scout ship, still following at maximum range, transmitted an urgent message back to the Council. "Emergency priority transmission. The humans, they've built something out here. Multiple installations. Energy readings off the scale. This isn't an evacuation fleet. It's a homecoming." Captain Thornbark stared at his sensors in disbelief. The structures ahead of them were enormous. Space stations that could house millions of people. industrial complexes that made the galaxy's largest factories look like small workshops, and defensive installations that could probably protect an entire solar system. "How long have they been building this?" his sensor officer asked. "Decades," Thornbark whispered. "Maybe longer." The human fleet approached the installations without any hesitation. Docking procedures began immediately, as if everything had been prepared in advance. Which, of course, it had. Director Hayes received Morrison's transmission as the fleet arrived. "All vessels have reached Rally Point Alpha, beginning Phase 2 integration." Hayes smiled. "Confirmed, Captain. Welcome to New Terra Network." The name meant nothing to the aliens listening to the transmission. They couldn't know that New Terra Network was humanity's greatest achievement. A completely self-sufficient civilization built in the void between galaxies. A civilization that had been waiting for this day for half a century. As the human fleet docked with the massive installations, Captain Thornbark made a decision that would change galactic history. Instead of returning immediately to report what he had seen, he ordered his ship to remain hidden and continue monitoring. What he saw over the next few hours terrified him. The human evacuation fleet wasn't seeking shelter at the installations. They were delivering supplies, equipment, and personnel to expand them. The installations weren't emergency refuges. They were the foundation of something much larger. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "I'm detecting massive power signatures from deeper in the void. There are more installations out there. Many more." Thornbark stared at the tactical display. Humanity hadn't just built a few secret bases. They had constructed an entire civilization in the darkness beyond the galaxy, and they were just getting started. His final transmission back to the Council was brief and terrifying. "The humans were never dependent on us. We were dependent on them, and now they're gone." The galaxy voted to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be asked twice, Doctor. Rebecca Torres floated in the observation deck of Installation Prime, looking out at the vast network of structures that stretched across the void. What she saw would have been impossible to imagine just 50 years ago. Humanity had built an entire civilization in the darkness between galaxies, and it was magnificent. "The integration is proceeding faster than projected," her assistant, Engineer Davis, reported as he joined her at the observation window. "The evacuation fleet brought the final components we needed for full operational status." Torres nodded, watching as massive cargo ships delivered entire factories to the construction platforms. "How many installations are fully online now?" 47 major stations, 312 minor facilities, and over 2,000 automated mining platforms, Davis replied. "The New Terra network is officially larger than most galactic civilizations." It was true. What humanity had built in secret over 5 decades was staggering in scope. They hadn't just prepared a place to hide from the galaxy. They had created a new kind of civilization entirely. The installations were connected by a web of energy beams and transportation tunnels that allowed instant travel across thousands of light years. Each major station was capable of supporting millions of people in complete comfort. The industrial facilities could manufacture anything humanity had ever dreamed of, plus technologies they were still developing. And at the heart of it all were the power sources that made it possible. Captured rogue stars that had been dragged from deep space and contained in massive energy collectors. Humanity had learned to harness the power of entire suns. "What's the latest report from the galaxy?" Torres asked. Davis consulted his datapad. "Not good. The medical crisis on Theta 7 is getting worse. Without human medical technology, the plague is spreading to neighboring systems. The Velkari are requesting emergency assistance." Torres felt a brief moment of sympathy, then remembered the Velkari delegates celebrating humanity's exile just days ago. "Any other requests?" "Dozens. The engineering problems in the outer spiral have shut down 3 major trade routes. The Greylings are offering substantial payment for human technical support. Even the Thornish are asking for help with their terraforming projects." This was exactly what humanity's strategic planners had predicted. The galaxy hadn't realized how much they depended on human innovation until it was gone. Humans had been the problem solvers, the ones who found solutions when everyone else gave up. Now, they were learning what the galaxy was like without humans to fix things. President David Walsh received the daily reports in his office, aboard the New Terra Central Command Station. As humanity's elected leader in exile, he had the responsibility of predicting how to respond to the galaxy's growing crisis. "Mr. President," his aide announced, "we're receiving another urgent transmission from the Galactic Council." Walsh looked up from the terraforming reports he had been reviewing. "Let me guess. They want to negotiate." "Yes, sir. The speaker is requesting immediate talks about humanity's possible return to galactic civilization." Walsh laughed. "Possible return? 6 days ago they voted unanimously to exile us. Now they want us back? The economic data suggests why," his aide continued. "Galactic trade is down 30% since we left. Industrial production has dropped by half in systems that relied on human technology. And the medical situation is approaching crisis levels on 17 worlds." This was the part of the plan that Walsh had always found most satisfying. Humanity hadn't been aggressive invaders or reckless expansionists, as the Council claimed. They had been the galaxy's immune system. They had been the species that solved problems other races couldn't handle. Without humans, the galaxy was discovering that many of their problems couldn't be solved at all. "Sir, there's more," his aide said. "Our deep space monitors are detecting unusual activity in several sectors. It appears that some species are attempting to reverse engineer abandoned human technology." "How's that working out for them?" Walsh asked. "Not well. The Zentarians managed to activate one of our medical scanners, but they can't understand how it works. The Velkari tried to restart a human terraforming plant and accidentally sterilized 3 continents." Walsh stood and walked to the massive window that showed the New Terra network spreading out in all directions. Thousands of ships moved between the installations, carrying supplies, people, and the components for even larger projects. "Send a message to the Council," he said finally. "Tell them that humanity appreciates their concern, but we're quite comfortable in our new home." "Sir, should I mention our expansion projects?" Walsh smiled. "No, let them discover those on their own. The expansion projects were humanity's next phase. Having proven that they could build a civilization in the void, they were now reaching out to unexplored regions of the galaxy. Human scout ships were mapping new sectors, identifying habitable worlds, and establishing contact with species the Council had never encountered. Admiral Lisa Cross commanded the New Terra Deep Space Fleet from her flagship, the Explorer. Her mission was to explore the regions beyond galactic civilization and make contact with whoever they found there. "Admiral," her sensor officer reported, "we're detecting intelligent signals from the Kepler sector. Unknown species, but their technology appears comparable to ours." Cross studied the data on her command screen. "Any signs of Council influence in that region?" "Negative. This appears to be a completely independent civilization. They don't seem to know the Galactic Council exists." This was exactly what Cross had hoped to find. The galaxy was much larger than the Council claimed, and there were many species that had never been invited to join galactic civilization. Some had been overlooked. Others had been deliberately excluded. Humans were about to change that. "Set course for the signal's origin," Cross ordered, "and prepare a first contact package. Let's see if we can find some new friends." Back in Council space, the crisis was getting worse every day. The speaker stood before an emergency session of the Council, his blue skin now pale with stress. "The situation is critical. Without human medical support, we're losing the fight against the plague. Without their engineering expertise, our infrastructure is failing. Without their trade networks, our economy is collapsing." The Velkari ambassador stood to address the chamber. "Perhaps we were too hasty in our decision. The humans were difficult to work with, but they were effective." "Difficult?" the Grayling representative interrupted. "They solved problems we couldn't solve. They prevented wars we couldn't prevent. They built things we couldn't build." The Zentarian ambassador consulted his datapad. "My analysis suggests that human activities prevented or resolved over 3,000 major crises in the past century. Without them, we're seeing a cascade effect of failures across multiple sectors." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. "Are you saying," the speaker asked slowly, "that we need the humans more than they need us?" "I'm saying," the Zentarian replied, "that we may have exiled the only species capable of holding galactic civilization together." As if to emphasize the point, an urgent message arrived from the outer spiral. Another trade route had failed. Another industrial center had shut down. Another world was requesting emergency assistance that no one could provide. The galaxy was learning what it meant to be alone. Meanwhile, in the void between galaxies, humanity was thriving. The new Terra network was expanding faster than its architects had ever imagined. New installations came online every day. New technologies were developed and implemented immediately. New species were making contact and asking to join humanity's growing alliance. Dr. Torres received the daily construction reports with satisfaction. We're ahead of schedule on all major projects. The new residential sectors will be ready months early. What about the long-range exploration missions? Davis asked. Excellent progress. Admiral Cross reports successful first contact with 3 new civilizations. All of them are interested in trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Torres smiled as she looked out at the vast network of human achievements. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth, expecting humanity to disappear into the darkness. Instead, humans had built something better than anything the galaxy had ever imagined, and they were just getting started. Deep in the new Terra archives, files marked Phase 3 were being updated daily. The galaxy thought humanity's exile was over. They had no idea that the real plan was just beginning. The galaxy voted to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be asked. Twice, Admiral Lisa Cross stood on the bridge of her flagship Liberator, watching as her rescue fleet approached the dying world of Kalos Prime. 6 months had passed since humanity's exile, and the galaxy was falling apart faster than anyone had predicted. Status report, she ordered her tactical officer. Planetary population of 4 million. Plague mortality rate at 60% and rising. Local government has collapsed. No council ships in the system. Cross nodded grimly. This was the third world this month where complete societal breakdown had followed the loss of human medical support. The Galactic Council had voted to exile the species they depended on most, and now they were learning the consequences. Begin humanitarian operations, she commanded. Deploy medical teams to the major population centers. I want full quarantine protocols and immediate treatment for anyone showing symptoms. The human fleet moved into orbit with practiced efficiency. These weren't military vessels in the traditional sense. They were mobile hospitals, research stations, and manufacturing plants designed for exactly this kind of operation. Within hours, human medical teams were on the planet's surface, bringing technologies the locals had never seen before. Dr. Mitchell supervised the emergency response from the planet's largest city. The plague is unlike anything in our databases, but it responds well to human immune boosters. We should have it contained within days. What the locals didn't know was that this particular plague had been easily treatable by humans for decades. The cure existed in every human medical facility. The council species had simply never bothered to learn how it worked. Doctor, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from orbit. Council ships are entering the system. Cross watched as a small council fleet approached Kalos Prime. She recognized the lead ship as belonging to the Velkari Defense Force. Captain Thornbark, the same alien who had monitored humanity's departure, was requesting communication. Admiral Cross, Thornbark appeared on her main screen looking haggard and defeated. I must protest your presence in council space. The exile order is still in effect, Cross smiled politely. Captain, we're not in council space. We're in Kalos Prime space, providing humanitarian assistance to a dying population. Are you here to help? Or are you here to let 4 million people die for political reasons? Thornbark's tree-like features showed obvious discomfort. The council has not authorized this intervention. The council voted to exile us, Cross replied. That means you don't get to make decisions about our actions anymore. We go where we're needed, when we're needed. The conversation was being broadcast across local communications networks. The people of Kalos Prime were listening as humans defended their right to live while their own galactic government worried about politics. Admiral, Thornbark tried again. Surely we can reach some accommodation. The council is prepared to discuss modified terms for humanity's return. Cross laughed. Return, Captain, we never asked to leave. You voted us out. We accepted your decision and made our own arrangements. Now we're quite comfortable where we are. What Cross didn't mention was that humanity's arrangements had grown far beyond what the council could imagine. The new Terra network now included allies from dozens of previously unknown civilizations. Human technology had advanced by decades in just 6 months of unrestricted development, and their military capabilities had grown to match their new responsibilities. President Walsh received Cross's report from his command center in the void. The cowl. Exelos Prime operation was a complete success. Local government is requesting formal alliance with New Terra. The Council fleet withdrew without incident. Any other requests for assistance? Walsh asked. His aide consulted a growing list. 17 emergency situations requiring immediate intervention, 43 worlds requesting medical supplies, over 100 colonies asking for engineering support, and 300 systems inquiring about trade agreements. Walsh studied the tactical display showing human operations across the galaxy. In just 6 months, humanity had gone from exiled refugees to the most sought-after allies in known space. Sir, his aide continued, we're also receiving daily communications from the Council. They're becoming increasingly desperate for negotiation. What are they offering? Full restoration of citizenship, preferential trade status, council seats for human representatives. They're essentially offering everything they refused to consider before the exile. Walsh turned to look out at the new Terra installations. Massive construction projects were underway everywhere. Humanity was building something that made the old galactic civilization look primitive by comparison. Tell the Council that we appreciate their offers, he said finally, but we're not interested in rejoining their organization. We have our own plans now. Those plans were becoming clear to anyone paying attention. Humanity wasn't just responding to emergencies anymore. They were actively seeking out civilizations that had been ignored or oppressed by the Council and offering them alternatives. General Patricia Stone commanded the new Terra Strategic Command from the massive fortress station Deep Guardian. Her mission was to prepare for what everyone knew was coming, the Council's attempt to force humanity back into their control. General, her intelligence officer reported, Council forces are massing in the tertiary sector. 3 fleet groups, mixed species composition. They appear to be preparing for some kind of action. Stone studied the tactical data. What's their most likely objective? Based on their positioning, they're probably planning to blockade our humanitarian operations. Force us to negotiate by threatening the populations we're trying to help. This was exactly what humanity's strategic planners had expected. The Council couldn't accept that their former subjects had become more powerful than they were. They would try to use force to restore the old order. They were about to learn why that was a mistake. Signal the Deep Space Fleet, Stone ordered. Tell Admiral Cross to prepare for extended operations, and activate the defense network around our allied systems. What happened next surprised even experienced military observers. As Council forces moved to intercept humanitarian missions, they discovered that humanity's rescue ships were supported by the most advanced fleet ever assembled. The human vessels that appeared to defend their operations weren't converted civilian ships. They were purpose-built warships incorporating technologies that the Council had never encountered. Shields that could absorb impossible amounts of damage, weapons that could disable enemy ships without destroying them, communication systems that allowed instant coordination across thousands of light years. But most importantly, they weren't alone. Captain Thornbark led his fleet toward a human medical mission in the Sigma sector, planning to force the humans to withdraw. What he found instead was a combined fleet representing dozens of species, all flying under human protection. Admiral Cross, he transmitted, you are ordered to cease operations and return to your designated exile zone. Cross's response came from a ship he didn't recognize, supported by vessels from at least 20 different civilizations. Captain, you seem to be confused about who gives orders to whom. We're here by invitation of the local government. Are you here to help with the medical emergency, or are you here to prevent life-saving aid from reaching dying people? Thornbark looked at his tactical display. He was outnumbered 10-1 by ships whose capabilities he couldn't assess. More importantly, his actions were being broadcast across dozens of star systems, showing the galaxy that the Council was more interested in politics than in saving lives. This isn't over, he finally transmitted. No, Cross agreed, it's not. But it's over for the old way of doing things. As Thornbark's fleet withdrew, his sensor officer made a discovery that would change everything. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting massive structures approaching from the galactic rim. Energy signatures are off the charts, and how massive? Thornbark asked. Sir, I think it's another human fleet, but it's enormous. Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. Thornbark stared at the display. Get me a priority channel to the Council. Tell them the humans aren't just operating rescue missions. I think they're preparing for something much bigger. Back in Council space, the emergency sessions were now happening every day. The speaker looked around a chamber that was half empty as many species had stopped attending. "The situation is beyond crisis," he announced. "Human operations are active in over 200 systems. Their allies now include species we've never heard of, and our intelligence suggests they're preparing for major fleet operations." The Zentarian ambassador stood to address the nearly empty chamber. "My analysis indicates that humanity never intended to remain in exile. This was always their plan. They used our vote as justification to build something completely outside our control." "What do you recommend?" the speaker asked. "Surrender," the Zentarian replied simply. "Accept that the old galactic order is finished. Try to negotiate the best terms we can for whatever comes next." The chamber fell silent. The species that had voted unanimously to exile humanity were now facing the possibility that humanity no longer wanted them back. In the void beyond the galaxy, President Walsh received the final reports he needed. "All preparations are complete, Mr. President. The reclamation fleet is ready for deployment. And our allies? Committed. 63 species have signed mutual defense agreements. The new Galactic Alliance is operational." Walsh nodded. "Then it's time to go home." The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's exile was over, but not because they were returning as supplicants. They were returning as liberators, ready to build something better than the civilization that had rejected them. The galaxy voted to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be asked twice. The massive holographic display in the council chambers showed something that made even the most experienced delegates gasp in shock. Approaching from the galactic rim was the largest fleet in recorded history. Thousands of ships spread across multiple star systems, moving with purpose toward the heart of galactic civilization. The speaker's blue skin had turned almost white with fear. "How many ships are we tracking?" The Zentarian analyst consulted his instruments with trembling hands. "Over 5,000 confirmed vessels. Energy signatures indicate multiple species, but the fleet organization is definitely human." "Sir, this isn't an invasion force. It's an entire civilization on the move." General Patricia Stone stood on the bridge of her command ship, the massive dreadnought, New Terra Prime, as humanity's reclamation fleet entered council space. 6 months of exile had ended, but not the way anyone had expected. "General," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 council species. They're requesting immediate negotiation." Stone looked at the tactical display showing the disposition of her forces. The fleet included not just human ships, but vessels from dozens of allied species that the council had never encountered. Races that had been ignored, oppressed, or excluded from galactic civilization were now flying under human protection. "Any council forces moving to intercept us?" she asked. "Negative. Most council fleets are standing down. The few that are still active are requesting instructions from their governments." This was exactly what humanity's strategic planners had predicted. The council had spent 6 months learning how much they needed human support. They weren't going to fight the species that had been keeping their civilization running. "Open a channel to all council worlds," Stone commanded. "It's time to announce our intentions." The message went out on every communication frequency in galactic space. President Walsh appeared on screens across thousands of worlds, speaking from the bridge of his flagship as the human fleet continued its advance. "People of the galaxy," he began, "6 months ago your leaders voted to exile humanity from galactic civilization. We accepted that decision and built our own civilization in the void. Now we return, not as conquerors but as liberators." The speech was being broadcast live across council space. Billions of beings watched as the human leader explained what was about to happen. "We return to reclaim what was always ours," Walsh continued. "The colonies we built, the trade routes we established, the infrastructure we created. But we also return to offer something new to those who have suffered under the old system." On worlds across the galaxy, local populations gathered around communication devices to hear what humanity was offering. Any species that wishes to join the new Galactic Alliance will be welcomed. Any world that requires assistance will receive it. Any civilization that has been ignored or oppressed by the Council will find protection under human leadership. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of worlds began transmitting acceptance of humanity's offer. Species that are So the galaxy voted to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be asked. Twice had been excluded from council membership for centuries requested immediate alliance with the New Terra network. Even some council members began inquiring about switching sides. Marcus Reed, now serving as humanity's prime minister, prepared for his return to the council chambers where his exile had begun. But this time, he wouldn't be standing alone before a hostile audience. This time, he would be delivering humanity's terms to a defeated enemy. The council emergency session was chaos. Delegates shouted at each other in dozens of languages, while others activated their ships for immediate departure from council space. The old order was collapsing in real time. The speaker pounded his gavel desperately. "Order, we must maintain order." But order was the last thing on anyone's mind. The Velkari delegation was arguing among themselves about surrender terms. The grayling representatives were frantically trying to establish communication with human commanders. The Thornish ambassadors had already left the chamber to arrange their world's immediate capitulation. The humans are requesting permission to address the council, a communications officer announced. "Granted," the speaker said quickly. "Anything they want." The main chamber doors opened and Marcus Reed entered. But he wasn't alone this time. Behind him walked representatives from dozens of species, all wearing the insignia of the new Galactic Alliance. The procession included races the Council had never seen before, along with several species that had been refused Council membership. Reed approached the speaker's podium where he had placed his diplomatic insignia 6 months ago. This time, he wore the uniform of Earth's Prime Minister and carried the authority of the most powerful alliance in galactic history. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice carrying easily through the silent chamber. "I have returned to deliver humanity's final message to this body." The silence was complete. Every delegate, every aide, every observer focused on Reed's words. 6 months ago, you voted to exile Earth and all human colonies from galactic civilization. You claimed we were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to remain part of your society. We accepted your judgment and departed. Reed paused, letting his words sink in. In our absence, you have learned what the galaxy looks like without human participation. Your medical systems failed. Your engineering projects collapsed. Your trade networks shut down. Your conflicts escalated without human mediation. Your problems remained unsolved because the species you exiled were the ones solving them. The truth of his words was undeniable. Every delegate in the chamber had witnessed the cascade of failures that followed humanity's departure. Today we return, but not to rejoin your organization. We return to establish a new order based on merit rather than politics, on cooperation rather than domination, on progress rather than stagnation. Reed gestured to the representatives standing behind him. These are our allies, species you ignored, excluded, or oppressed. Together we have built something better than what existed before. The speaker found his voice. Prime Minister Reed, surely we can negotiate some accommodation? The council recognizes that mistakes were made. Reed smiled the same smile he had shown 6 months ago. Mistakes? Speaker, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to exile the species that held your civilization together. We chose to build something better without you. But surely, another delegate interrupted, humanity can benefit from council membership. We can offer preferential trade status, technology sharing agreements, expanded representation. Reed shook his head. You still don't understand. We don't want to join your council. We want to replace it. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The idea that the council itself could be replaced was unthinkable to most delegates. Reed waited for the noise to subside, then continued. The new Galactic Alliance is now active in over 1,000 systems. Our membership includes hundreds of species, many of whom you've never encountered. Our technology surpasses yours by decades. Our military capabilities are beyond your ability to challenge. He paused to let the implications become clear. Any world that wishes to join our alliance is welcome. Any species that prefers to remain under council authority may do so, but they will receive no assistance from human allied worlds. Any government that attempts to interfere with our operations will be treated as hostile. The speaker's voice was barely a whisper. What about the council? What happens to us? Reed's expression showed no sympathy. That depends entirely on your choices. You can adapt to the new reality and find your place in it, or you can cling to your old privileges and become irrelevant. The galaxy has already begun choosing. As if to emphasize his point, urgent messages were arriving in the chamber every few minutes. Another council world had requested alliance with humanity. Another species had withdrawn from council membership. Another industrial center had switched to human protection. The choice is yours, Reed concluded. But choose quickly. The galaxy is moving forward with or without you. He turned and walked toward the chamber exit, followed by his allied representatives. At the door, he paused and looked back at the stunned delegates. Oh, and Speaker, you might want to start looking for new employment. I don't think the council will be needing your services much longer. The doors closed behind him, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Within hours, the collapse accelerated. Half the remaining council worlds announced their withdrawal and requested immediate alliance with the new galactic system. The council's military forces began defecting in massive numbers. Trade agreements were canceled as worlds scrambled to establish relationships with humanity's network. President Walsh received the reports from his command ship as the human fleet established control over critical systems throughout former council space. What's the final tally? He asked his aide. 80% of former council worlds have requested alliance or protection agreements. The remaining council loyalist systems are isolated and non-contiguous. The old government has effectively ceased to exist. Walsh nodded with satisfaction. And our expansion into unexplored regions? Proceeding ahead of schedule. We've made contact with over 300 previously unknown civilizations. Most are eager to join our alliance rather than deal with council bureaucracy. The transformation was remarkable. In just 6 months, humanity had gone from exiled outcasts to the dominant power in galactic civilization. But more importantly, they had created something better than what existed before. Dr. Torres received the construction reports from across the new Galactic Alliance. Infrastructure projects are exceeding all projections. We're building faster and more efficiently than ever before. The new Alliance species are contributing technologies and resources we never imagined. The galaxy that emerged from humanity's exile was unrecognizable from what had existed before. Trade flowed freely between allied worlds. Medical advances were shared immediately across all member species. Engineering projects that would have taken decades under the old council were completed in months. And at the center of it all was humanity, no longer constrained by the politics and limitations that had frustrated them for centuries. The final irony came when the few remaining council loyalist worlds began experiencing the same cascade of failures that had plagued the galaxy during humanity's absence. Without access to human technology and expertise, their societies began breaking down just as they had 6 months before. One by one, they sent desperate messages requesting admission to the new Galactic Alliance. Marcus Reed, now installed as the first president of the Alliance Council, received these requests with the same polite smile he had worn during his original exile. Tell them, he instructed his aide, that membership in the Alliance is by invitation only. They'll need to demonstrate their value to our civilization before we consider their applications. It was a complete reversal of the old order. The species that had voted to exile humanity now found themselves begging for the privilege of joining humanity's organization. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth, thinking they were removing a troublesome element from their perfect civilization. Instead, they had freed humanity to build something far superior, and in the end, the galaxy came to them.